So, today's topic is centered around marketing. And obviously, there are just so many aspects of marketing when it comes to, right, being an entrepreneur, getting your product out there, and obviously differentiating, right? Everything from figuring out your kind of buyer persona to how do you stand out, right? The things that you don't or do around marketing. So some of the things that we're going to be talking today. But Michael, just wanted to pick your brain real quick. Any stories about marketing that come to your mind from back in the day of kind of building your business?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's been really interesting topic for this week. So for those of you that have been watching our Black Entrepreneur Initiative, we were kind of honored this week. Edward Lewis, who was the famous co-founder of Essence Magazine and really one of our country's iconic Black entrepreneurs, has agreed to join Lonely Entrepreneur as an ambassador. And it makes me think, V, of just marketing, right? And what must have been like to create a magazine and a property like Essence back,
Oh my God.
in the 70s, right? And so it makes you almost think about, if you think about marketing in the context of, I'm going to create a magazine targeted towards the Black population, and that's so new and different, difficult, and that's what makes new and different difficult. But it also goes to the topic I think about first when it comes to marketing, and that is that today, unlike many years ago, we all live in an incredibly cluttered world
Mhm.
where it's almost impossible to just on its face, like, when, Mr. Lewis started his magazine and somebody said, you're going to start a property specifically for the Black community, probably people said it doesn't exist and it probably won't work because it doesn't exist, but it doesn't exist. Today, it's impossible to have somebody say it doesn't exist, right? It's every place you go, it's full of clutter and competition and the frustration that a lot of early stage companies feel, because you're like, I know I'm doing something unique, but the world doesn't know it because I get caught up in all this clutter. So when I think of market and even when you think of AI and machine learning, there are things that are learning at light speed faster than humans and
Right.
serving up experiences light things faster than humans, to the point where a lot of these technologies will be completely free
Hmm.
where you'll just get to use them and it'll learn and go and serve up the perfect experiences for you all over the place. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's how it feels sometimes. So if you're a one or a two or a 5-person company, you say to yourself, how do you compete with that? So I think when it comes to marketing, I think one of the first things that we have to kind of break our mindsets about is that tactics win, right? Tactics don't win because we all use the same tactics, right? We all use social and email and dot and dot, 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 dot. So if we're all using them, it's what we put into them that wins. It's not the fact that you put them out there. And as we all know, you can spend a heck of a lot of time implementing those tactical things, only to find and sometimes they may work, and that's great, only to find yourself going, okay, I did all this stuff and I post stuff on social media all day long, or I do whatever it is, but how is it and why am I standing out? So that's the first thing, is that don't think marketing is successful because you implement tactics. Marketing is successful because you stand out. You take this playground where nobody else is playing, or a market strategy or a positioning. And when you find that, right, you implement it into your tactics. Okay, so I'll give you a couple of analogies, right? And this relates a lot to the finding a playground where nobody else is playing, right?
Michael,
If
hold your thought for a second because I just want to kind of reiterate, right? So um, you are somebody who, is credited with basically creating an industry, rewarding, people for being healthy back in the day, right? So not only did it not exist, right, you had nothing to kind of go on, right? So you, in terms of marketing, you were creating not only a business, but you created an industry, right? And so it's being able to, like you said, position, right? And make people understand that just because this doesn't exist doesn't mean there's value. There's no value in it, right?
Well, you almost would argue that those are the best types of things to go after. Right now, I don't know if Ed Lewis would have felt that way with all the systemic racism and stuff that existed at the
Right.
time,
Right.
um, but you were all looking for those white spaces, right?
Hmm.
And at the time, as you can imagine, like everybody who's gotten to know me and the Lonely Entrepreneur knows, it makes for a great story afterwards. In the beginning,
Right.
people are like, we're never going to do this. It almost makes you feel that's what you're onto something, right? But then you actually, have to pay the bills and feed the kids and right, do stuff
Right.
that actually
You know,
matters.
yeah.
So what I would say is that the talent is, how do you find this in a cluttered world,
Hmm.
right? Or as sometimes we like to say, there aren't as many blockbuster drugs anymore,
Right.
right? So how do you find the nuances? So it always comes down to, how do you find these spots, and how do you find this positioning, right? And again, I go back to, for those of you that joined us last week, I go back to Nike and Asics and Saucony. If you ask any runner, Nike would finish a distant third, pardon the pun, in how good the running sneakers are, and they sell 50 times more running sneakers than each of those brands combined. Okay, so the strategy and the positioning of that is hugely important. So I'll go back to my healthcare business, and sometimes the strategy can be a market you go after. I'm going to go after this market for this piece, right? Sometimes it could be a way that you position it, but it's got to be big and differentiating. It's got to make people go, yeah.
Michael, it always makes me think of the genetic test, the company that you worked with, right? It's just such a perfect example, right, of a product, and it's all about kind of marketing and positioning.
Yeah, listen, as DNA testing became more prevalent and people could really use it to get out in front of medical issues, they started to make the tests available for moms, right? Where they'd have the DNA test and it could tell them a lot about their unborn baby, pregnant moms rather. And the company was going out there and selling it. And that's a product that has value,
Hmm.
right? But the way that they were selling it was very functional.
Hmm.
You take your test, you show up for a review, we tell you this, we tell you that, and it was getting lost. And we're like, well, wait a minute, isn't this one of those, is there anything you wouldn't do for your unborn baby?
It changes the whole perspective, just changes everything.
Right. And you're like, the commercial of, oh, you didn't get this for your, right?
Right.
Like, so
Right.
anyway, I'm making it seem like these things come together in 5 minutes, but what I want everybody to think about is, you are one of 1,000 if you just line up with everything else. And so you have to fight to find the way that you're going to market with a positioning or a strategy where you go, yeah. Okay. Just working with a company, and they are creating everything around death.
Mm.
Right? Right now, when somebody dies, there's a million things you need to do. It's all over the way. You can't go to one place. It's a one-stop shop for death. Right? And you go, yeah.
Right.
I can
Heavy
put that in
topic,
social.
but so needed.
What's that?
Heavy topic, but so needed.
Yeah. I don't mean to be coy about the topic, but the
Yeah. Yeah.
point is, you hear that and you go, yeah.
Right.
Which means you go, yeah, on social media, yeah, in an email campaign, yeah, on your website. But that's the point, everybody, is you got to fight for that. You got to find it and try to, if you don't find it, you could still do okay, right? But it's going to be harder and harder and harder to cut through,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much competition. Okay. So how do you create this positioning? In fact, before I go to how do you create it, I want to plant in people's heads that positioning is more important than product. Okay. If we drew a pie chart and we said, what percentage of our time do we spend on positioning and what percent of time do we spend on building our product or service? Inevitably, for early stage companies, we will spend 75% of the time on the product or service.
Right.
and 25% of the time on the positioning.
Well, because for
Okay?
most entrepreneurs, that's their craft, right? That's
Right,
their vision, that's the idea. So that's where their energy goes to.
right. Nobody isn't paying attention to your product and service until you give them a reason to. Right? So you can make it perfect and you'll never know that it is because people won't pay attention. Or said differently, many, many, many really, really successful products or services are actually not as good as other things. They're just much better positioned.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't want to insult anybody from Texas, but the Dallas Cowboys have sucked for years, and it's the most valuable sports team in football. Right? Because it's positioned as America's team, and they have the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, and they haven't won a playoff game in 20 years. I know there's some people from Texas here, so hopefully they're from Houston and not from Dallas. But right, so we as entrepreneurs are always going to take pride in our product and service. But what I'm telling you is the positioning of it is you have to switch it. You have to have it be 75% positioning and 25% product. Okay, because that's what people pay attention to. And once they pay attention, you go, oh, everything death, now I'll go there. And yes, you're going to have to come up and deliver on the product. But as entrepreneurs, we have to think about what is this positioning that is going to win. And part of that positioning has to be has to result in a kind of visceral, clear, quick, yes, I got it. If your positioning is, let me tell you the 23 things about, like, you're out, you're done. Nobody's paying attention to that. Everything death, I got it. Right? So when you fight for this positioning, don't think you could just say, here's all the great things about our product, and that's a positioning. Nobody's reading that. Okay. You've got to establish it. So what are some of the positionings that you can use? So I'll give you an example that was very successful for us in our incentive days in healthcare. So we were basically saying you should reward for all these different behaviors that, let's say, a health plan was putting in place. So for those of you who have interacted with your health plan, they offer you diabetes and heart disease and basically everything for all your different conditions. And nobody was using them, these tools. And so we were like, you have all these different solutions. You should just reward for any of them. And we were saying that, and they got it conceptually, but it wasn't like really, really taking hold. And what we basically did was we drew something that looks like spokes around a wheel. So just think a bunch of circles with a big hub in the middle. Mm-hmm. And around the edge, it said diabetes, heart disease, and in the beginning, it said, in the middle, it said incentives. Right? And you put that in front of somebody, and there wasn't as much social media back then. Right. You put that in front of somebody, and they'd be like, got it. Okay? So the positioning, right, and your marketing, right, and the way you come up with these things that people know. So lesson number one here is build on things that people know. Right? Spokes around the wheel, you put that in front of them, they're like, I get that. Right? You can make analogies to other things that people already know. So for example, in rewards and healthcare, we're like, every other industry that tries to get a consumer to do something uses rewards. Healthcare doesn't. Mm-hmm. That's a positioning. What would make us think we can get people to manage their diabetes without rewards when we can't get them to open up a bank account without rewards? Okay, positioning. So again, you came here today and we're talking about marketing and you're talking about, AI and machine learning is going to make it more and more and more efficient to serve things up. What you serve up is going to matter. And it can't be functional because AI and machine learning are going to make all that functional stuff go away, right? So, but when you say every other industry uses rewards, healthcare isn't, I know what I said. I was like, yeah. And then someone goes, I look around and I don't see that. Or everything death, like, yeah, I just had some family member died 2 years ago and we had to do all this stuff over here and this stuff, like, it was terrible. right? And you go, yeah. So what you have to fight for is analogies that people know, ways that, the spokes around the wheel is not some groundbreaking, right, analogy. It's simple. People got it. People understood it. It also is, part of this positioning is your unique know-how. For those of you who have been on some of these sessions, I talk about having your unique know-how come to bear, because then you get position going, oh man, if I don't have that person or that know-how, I lose, I fail at whatever I'm trying to do.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about the implementation of this stuff, but the most important thing that you can do, or that you can do with the people that are assisting you, us, consultants, marketing people, is fight for that go-to-market approach that makes people go, yeah. Right? And if you don't find it, fight harder for it, because what you may need to do is you may need to focus your vision and say, I'm only going to sell to purple people, and I'm going to be known as the purple people solution. Because if you can't find a bigger one, you have to find one. And if you got to be known as the one for purple people, someone can go, oh, okay, yeah. Right? Like another one. Somebody comes and says, well, we're doing an e-commerce site to get people to buy all this kind of stuff. And I was like, all right, does the world need another e-commerce site? Right? No. So you flush it out, and it turns out that one of the big parts that this person was particularly passionate about was the fact that they wanted really people to be able to take into account their own culture and ethnicity and sexual orientation as when they purchased. Okay? So you go, okay, but you've got Amazon and you've got all these online platforms. So you would ask yourself, is there a place out there that takes into account your culture when you buy? Answer is no. Do you know? Like, Victoria, you came from Belarus, right? Is there a place that takes into account that you're, right?
Right.
Well, wait a minute, but there's no shortage of e-commerce sites.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the one that takes into account your culture? Okay, so you go, yeah. All right, so this requires creativity. It requires you to think out in different ways. It requires you to just not do what everybody else is doing. And techniques like leveraging analogies that people know, leveraging other examples, right, of things that happened in parallel industries, okay, are things where we already know certain things and therefore we can build upon them, right? Another is bring forward your unique know-how. Okay, you can hear nothing I'm talking about is about the product or service. Because if I said to you, hey, we've got this site and it lets you go in and see the clothes you want to do, and you do it this way, and you do it based on the fact that you happen to be Chinese and did it, you'd go, yeah, okay. There's a lot of sites that allow me to do that. But the important part's the Chinese part, right? The fact that the shopping isn't occurring taking into account your culture. Okay, it's not the widget, right? So every one of the positionings I'm talking about is about, right, setting it up a way where you can find your unique playground and unique way to go to market. So let me stop there a little bit, see if anybody has any questions or wants to raise an issue about their business.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that we really want this to be interactive. So please feel free to chime in with questions or obviously experience that you've had. We want to be able to address your specific issues. So don't be shy.
Cool. Please raise your hand, even if I'm rambling on. Okay.
Michael, I do have a question, but
Sure.
this is more of a. Oh, somebody say no. Okay. This is more of a general question. Came in. What do you suggest an entrepreneur focuses on at the early stages of their business when it comes to marketing?
Listen, I'm biased. I always think it's the stuff we're talking about right now, right? When you wake up in the morning with the energy to kind of bring your passion to life and to start working on it, one of the best feelings you can have is when you feel like you're working on it to something that's truly going to stand out. Right.
Mhm.
And conversely, one of the hardest things to do is to wake up with that passion and be working on these things, not just marketing, but, marketing is a lot of, hand-to-hand combat these days. And to say, I'm going to do all this, but is it really going to win? Because you haven't yet figured out your playground and your unique positioning of it. So I always think that this is where it starts.
Mhm.
Put differently, strategy wins, tactics don't win in this day and age. Same thing, positioning is more important than product. So I think first and foremost, you got to nail this. And once you get that North Star, then you just, when you're starting to implement it into your website, right? Implement it into social media, implement it into, kind of email marketing.
Mhm.
Then the stuff that you put into those things have better results. So the rush to implement and do is very understandable. But if you do all the stuff and it's just going to get lost in what everybody else is doing, right?
Right.
This is the
So
most important.
right. So I
Part.
would love to hear from anyone, on the call, everything that we've been talking about it. Do you kind of, right, being able to analyze this now, do you feel like you've really nailed down kind of the positioning of your product or service, right?
All right. So, hey,
Hey,
greetings. This is
hey,
Victoria from Chicago. How you guys doing? It's always a pleasure to jump on board and listen to the dialogue with conversations such as this. As you guys know, I am in a unique position, Michael, as we discussed before, as a general contractor,
Yep.
energy efficient service provider, and working in the space of renewables. My marketing strategy has really been based on the social media platforms, but I'm still finding myself challenged to get my marketing to pull into my sales funnel to target my specific marketing clientele and audience. As you were saying, when you're looking at this, I kind of have a question in regards to what is the best strategy when we're talking about a beta marketing tactic to encourage more engagement. I've heard before that you should at least have anywhere between 7 to 9 touches with your potential clients. So I'm really trying to see, is that realistic, or is there a better way of touching? Like, should we be going back to the traditional mail out placards, you know what I'm saying, door tags, or should we go back to, newspaper articles, marketing on the radio and advertising? Should we invest in that space, or should we still be focused more on doing our social media pushes and doing like touches such as no cards, or what do you recommend, especially when it's something that's still fresh and new and people are still eerie and suspect about it?
Yeah. So a couple of different things. Who are you selling to? Who is your customer?
So for me specifically, I am focused on small businesses, not-for-profit organizations, and investors or real estate individuals in the commercial and residential spaces.
Gotcha. So I think that the concept that we talked about in the beginning, which is really kind of nailing your positioning, is incredibly important, because think about when somebody sends you a LinkedIn message, right? If somebody sends you a LinkedIn message that doesn't really compel you, you would need to talk to them 27 times before you did something. But if somebody sends you a LinkedIn message that really nails it, you'll do it the first time. So Victoria, don't think so much about 7 touches, 1 touches, the compelling message about why you're different and all the things we've been talking here is super important into that. Okay. Once, in the oodles and oodles of LinkedIn messages that I get, 1 in 100 will really stand out, and I don't need to touch them 7 times to do it. So again, Michael Dermer, broken record, find the positioning. I think that with respect to the individual techniques that you're going after, I don't think that the old school stuff matters or is any better or any different. I mean, we live in a digital world now. So I think that what you want to be able to do is, number one, when you come to the table with a differentiating strategy, you basically use digital platforms which give you scale, right? Social media in general, especially these days, most people don't use social media as a mechanism to go figure out what to buy. Certainly business buyers don't use social media. So you have to think about what's your channel, right? Where am I going to find a business buyer, right? You're not going to find them on Instagram. And if they are on Instagram, they're not there in a buying mode. So then you say, okay, and again, where I'm going to digital is the platforms these days, whether they be Facebook, LinkedIn, right? They give you the ability to do two things very efficiently. Number one, target, right? You can target pretty much whoever you want. You can pick demographics and interests and more and more and more. And secondly, you get real-time feedback on what's working and not working, right? So if you want to find commercial real estate owners in LinkedIn, you can use LinkedIn tools to say, that's who I want to target with an ad. And 10 minutes later, how your ad performed. Okay. So, and then it becomes a matter of just of testing, right? Of testing and testing and testing and watching what's work, right? And what people are responding to and tinkering with the message. The going to other channels, the other channels face the same challenges, right? Of clutter. And so really honing in on your uniqueness and getting really efficient, either yourself or through vendors, of messaging to the exact audience you want to message to by using these tools that continue to get more and more efficient. And you get real-time feedback and you adjust accordingly.
I totally agree with that. And I think that that's kind of where I am right now, is even though I know I sit in such a peculiar niche and I offer something unique and different, putting my finger on that lately has been a challenge because of all the additional clutter. And I've been very fortunate that my business is growing just simply off of word of mouth, versus having to do, strategic marketing strategies. But again, I think that one of the biggest challenges where most of us have a problem in our businesses is what makes our business unique and stand out from the rest of our competitors, and how we can market that. And so I think that for me, it's more of the educational piece on how I market and strategize with everybody, as well as being a diversified contractor and environmental scientist. So that's probably my unique selling pitch, but absolutely would love to elaborate and grow in that space as I move forward.
Yeah, like for example,
input, Michael.
Yeah. So, Victoria, if I asked you a couple questions and I said, why are you unique? I would probably use the old 7 whys, right? And you'd answer the first time and I'd say, well, why are you that? And why are you that? And why are you that? And at the end of the day, all of us have a unique set of experiences or backgrounds or whatever that bring to the table that uniqueness, right? Either about us, right? Or about the way we're going about it. But because the world doesn't know that, right? I remember we did a project for an accounting firm, and the head of sales for the accounting firm would craft messages that were like, we're going to basically do great accounting and do it cheap and I was like, well, what accounting firm doesn't say that? Like, one accounting firm doesn't say they're going to do, they're going to do it inexpensively. They have happy customers and they do all this, here's a list of 10 accounting things. I was like, why would you ever call them back? Right. I would never call them back. And, we just started to message to other things. It happened to be nonprofit accounting. So we started to message to, things that the executive director would experience, the lead of a nonprofit firm would experience if the accounting went wrong, or how the accounting feeds into their ability to raise money. And so they started to talk to, we use this analogy of what happens when the executive director walks into a board meeting, right? And the numbers are off or the fundraising is down. Accounting is what supports that, right? So Victoria, like, everybody has this unique positioning about this, but what I'm really trying to encourage everybody to do is to make sure that everybody understands that just saying, here's the services that we provide and oh, by the way, we're good at it and we have great customers and great prices, right? Doesn't stand out to anybody. And we as buyers don't buy things that way, right? Because we're immune to all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So Victoria, keep digging deep on why you're unique. Obviously, some of the things you mentioned about diversity and women is some of it, right? But people still want a great product and service. But if you're, I know a little bit about your background, right? Some of your background and some of your unique experience that lays into that, and some of that know-how, right? Hey, listen, if you're implementing this for a building, make sure you don't do these 3 things, right? So those are the things that have to come through. And those are the things obviously that you want to test. What's interesting about this is that the easy thing to do for a marketing firm to tell somebody to do is to go implement this and this and this. What most marketing firms don't do well, because it's actually hard, is find the right positioning.
So let me ask you this question. Is the verbiage in your marketing also important? For example, I like to use solution-based or a la carte or concierge as that unique feature that I offer specifically because, especially in the space of sustainability, it's not a one size fits all. So I wanted to know, would that be another strong pull from somebody looking to vet or look at me as a potential contractor or service provider?
So the answer to the question is, does it stand out as something that's compelling? So for example, anytime in our daily lives that we interact with things, we hear the word solution, right? Now, you may be being literal, like I'm using the word solution, or just solution-based, right? So, but whenever we all use these kind of generic words, they're words that everybody uses, and therefore if everybody uses, it's almost like nobody's using. But let's take the word concierge, right? In the context of, and this is like an example of building on an analogy that people know. People know what a concierge is. They're used to it, right, in a hotel. But what if you took concierge, right, and you apply it to another industry, right? People started to do this with medicine, right? We've now heard about concierge medicine, right? Building upon an analogy of something that people already know, right, to gain traction. So I think, Victoria, I don't think that there is a magic, the words absolutely matter. In fact, they matter the most because people are going to only read a sentence or 2 or 3 before they decide whether to move on or not. So they absolutely matter, but you can't use generic words. You got to use words that stand out. And sometimes words that are very well known to people that are generic words, but just aren't used, in an industry, right? Can often, like if you applied concierge to accounting, people would be like, oh, I haven't heard of that. Might be dumb, right? And a lot of the things that become differentiating strategies start out as a list of dumb things, right? Because remember, you're trying to go out of left field, right? But you can take things like concierge and make a distinction between what's actually out there. Okay, so you have to kind of fight the temptation to use generic things, right? And bring them to bear against the context of this kind of unique know-how that you have. The other thing that I would say is that you really have to make sure that you're aligning to the things that really matter to your buyers. And I know that sounds like a very generic thing, but when I say matter to your buyers, don't just matter to the people that are in front of you selling, right? Almost think of it as, how do I align to the things that is on their CEO's desk that trickles down to my buyer, right? So if I'm talking to them about, kind of environmental compliance and sustainability, I can come to the table and say, I have a sustainability solution for you. Or I can say, as you know, right, in a building of your size, the additional cost is going to be X and Y and Z if you don't put in place this solution. So I'm talking to the CEO of that organization who, if that cost is big enough, he or she is really going to care. The solution to that is, I give you a package of services that help you implement. But again, the same message is it can't just be a laundry list of stuff that everybody else does. Okay. So Victoria Sherman, the other Victoria, any other questions before I keep going?
No, you've been answering them as we've been going, so.
Okay. So when you kind of fight your way through to finding these differentiating go-to-market positionings, which again is the hardest thing and the most important thing, then you say, okay, well, how do I implement that? When you break down your pieces of your marketing organization and you think about, right, your tactical things, you think about, first and foremost, from an overall marketing thing, you got to think about what those goals are. What are you actually trying to accomplish? Are you trying to, Victoria, in your example, generate leads? And you can't take your eye off that ball, because what you do from a marketing perspective is dictated by, right, the goals you're trying to accomplish. If you are trying to accomplish brand positioning, that is different from trying to accomplish lead generation. They work together, okay? But most organizations are trying to do both. But you have to say to yourself, what am I trying to accomplish? Okay, if I'm trying to position a brand, right? That's one set of tactics, okay? If I'm trying to get a certain number of leads, that's another tactic, okay? If I'm trying to generate, e-commerce sales, right? And that's another type of, so your goal, right? And this is often not done. The two things I'm talking about are the things that are not done. The go-to-market positioning and the positioning of your product in a unique way, and setting very specific goals for what marketing is trying to do. Okay, those are the fundamental things. All the hows are aligned to those things. If you're trying to drive e-commerce traffic or e-commerce sales, that how is different from branding. They go together, of course, but the tactics you put in place with limited resources are dictated by what goal you're trying to achieve. So go-to-market positioning, very specific goals, and be deliberate about what you're trying to do, okay? When you do that, then you start to implement. You say, okay, great, I'm trying to sell to, in your case, Victoria, I'm trying to sell to, commercial, residential, commercial owners of buildings. Okay, where do I find them? I've got a unique positioning. I know what my goal is. I want to get 100 leads a month. Where do I go find them? Okay, and what are the tactics then that I'm going to put in place to be able to achieve that goal? Okay, well, it seems like LinkedIn, right? These are business buyers. So LinkedIn is probably the most likely candidate for this. Okay, but I've got to have good sales materials, right, that support a B2B sales process. Okay, so all the things you do in marketing and in a related way with sales are dictated by those marketing goals. Okay, so, Victoria, you happen to say social media. You should ask yourself, are my buyers buying things on Instagram? Right, as a commercial property manager, and again, I don't know if that's your buyer.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, they're not. So when you do social media,
they're not there.
Right, so what percentage of your...
Absolutely not there.
Oh, you're breaking up a little.
One more time, Victoria. Did we lose her? Well,
no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but no, realistically, like, I have to say probably 5.
Oh, Victoria, hang on. You sound like you're
My
underwater.
target audience is on social media and
There you
offer as well. But the long term, can you guys hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, yeah, I was just saying that like my single time services, yes, my social media is absolutely a good place to market and brand that. But more than anything, meant with people because I go live and show their basis, but market isn't there. No.
Right.
Right. So the question is today, Victoria, what percentage of your time are you spending, or time or resources are you spending on social media now for your existing company?
I have to say 60% of my my resources go to my marketing on
All
social
right.
media right
So
now.
this is a really good example, right? So you're spending 16% of your time on something that is to a channel that none of your buyers are watching to buy. Right? So again, goes back to your goals. If your goals are I want lead generation for this business, where would I find these people? Now, somebody may have said to you, you should do social media, right? Somebody might have said that who may give you advice about your business, or right, over a beer in a bar or whatever it is. You as the leader have to say to yourself, okay, I think I have something unique. I want to put it out in the marketplace. My goal is I want to get leads, right? So that's my primary goal. Secondary goals, a little bit of branding and blah, blah, blah. So where do I get leads? How do I do that? I'm going to spend my time on, LinkedIn, right? I'm going to go get an automated LinkedIn solution or use something like LinkedIn Navigator. And I'm going to do ads through Sales Navigator, I think it's called. And I'm going to do ads through LinkedIn. And that's going to be 70% of what I do, right? And the other thing is, okay, well, I want to show my know-how. So the other 20% I'm going to do is I'm going to try to position myself as a thought leader, right? I'm going to do a white paper, and what my website is going to say, demonstrate some of my know-how. Okay. I'll do a little social media, right? What this takes me back to a little bit, Victoria and everybody, is this accounting firm that I was talking about. And the accounting firm's like, yeah, well, we're going to put all this content. I was like, do people that are buying accounting services sit around, look for content to be put out by a firm they don't know on social media? Like, is the content you put like, and I'm like, well, no, nobody who's a really, overworked finance person at a nonprofit is poking around the internet to find accounting content. Right? So you really have to be disciplined with scarce resources to say, how do I take my unique positioning, but also set goals that direct my effort in terms of the specific customer that I'm trying to go after. Okay, some of the things that we're talking about here, is, I'm talking a little bit about B2B, but the same thing's about B2C, because you have to think about, am I going to implement, for example, digital marketing spending where I do, let's say, for example, Facebook ads, where I can target and I can see exactly how they're doing, versus, let's say, Instagram, right? So I do Instagram for my product or services. Am I likely to generate from Instagram? So what would you do? You'd say, well, I could put content out all day long and that could take a lot of time, or I could just use Instagram's advertising platform and test it and pick an audience and see how we do, because you're much more likely to garner a customer where you're picking the actual customer than you are from people wandering on your Instagram. Now, don't get me wrong, with a consumer-based service, Instagram and the way you position yourself can be incredibly valuable. And it can lead to people being interested in your product and spreading the word. Okay, but this is the kind of breakdown that you have to do to determine where you put your scarce marketing time, or resources. Okay, the lack of specific marketing goals and this whole notion of, well, if we put kind of a brand out there, they will come. That just doesn't happen. Right? Remember, we're all being targeted every single day through technology based on our interests, our behavior, that serves up really, really relevant stuff to us. When somebody shows up stuff to us that's not relevant, we're not even seeing it. So the point is that generalized branding has to be done, but it has to be done, kind of incrementally over time, implementing your cornerstone differentiating strategy. Right. But when you're talking about, for example, acquiring leads or, right, generating e-commerce customers, you can go spend a little bit of money on a social media advertising platform and see exactly who clicked, who didn't click, who opened, who went to our website, who bought something, right? And you get feedback right away. So each of these tools and techniques should be, the question you need to ask yourself is it aligned to the goals, and does it implement the strategy that is going to stand out from everybody else?
All roads lead to goals. It's a recurring theme in our conversations.
Yeah, totally. And marketing is one of those areas, as you mentioned in the beginning, Victoria, like marketing is one of those areas where you can really get stuck here because there's just a lot to do. And most people off the cuff will say to you, do social media, do email marketing. And then the question is why?
Right. And it's really time consuming things. So you feel like you're always busy and doing something, but it actually doesn't get you closer to achieving business results.
Right. And if you think about, I go back to that white paper, the 7 deadly sins, that positioned us in such a way that everybody we put that in front of said, these people just know a hell of a lot more about this than I do. And that's what we all want, right? We want, even if you're consumer-based business, you're even let's say you're a shopping site and you want to say, like, these people really understand my style better than anyone. Like, you just want them to go, like, that's where I go for my answers, because they've demonstrated an insight to me. So the techniques that you use around, for example, we called it at the time 7 deadly sins, right? Was a positioning to say, this is a whole capability that if you don't understand what you're doing, you could really get yourself in trouble. Right. And Victoria, your type of service, and I know some of the other folks that are here, other types of services, like, you really have to think about how it is that you're standing out in such a way that people will gravitate to that message the first time they see it. Yes, you can. I don't know about you, but there are certain things you can put in front of me 70 times that I wouldn't pay attention. Forget about, like you said, about 7 or 8. Like, I don't think those types of analogies, I think, are like the old, when you had TV ads, right? You got to see it 3 times before you get it. But now, right, there's a million, emails and other stuff that you get that just doesn't stand out in any meaningful way.
Right.
Okay. Once you set these goals, then you have to operationalize it. Then you say, okay, I have website, I have a little project plan around my website, I have email marketing, I have a project, like, then you have to break it down, but you have to make sure, right? You have to make sure you're always going back to that strategy. In marketing in particular, we can get really caught up in doing. You have to always ask yourself, is the strategy coming through? Is the messaging coming through aligned to the positioning where we win? Okay, so you've heard me, the Budweiser analogy. Budweiser came out and said, we're the only beer that doesn't have corn syrup. Nobody ever cared about corn syrup, right? And now they position, so they should be asking themselves, is everything we're saying about corn syrup in all the channels that we use? So you have to make sure that, especially in marketing, you don't get caught up in just the effort and the energy, right? That you're continually focusing on, am I aligning to my goals, and am I implementing the strategy, right, in such a way that strategy is consistently deployed across everything that I'm doing.
Great insights. Does anybody have any questions? I just want to take a couple of minutes at the end here for a few things. Michael, thank you for kind of going over that. I think as entrepreneurs, we often do find ourselves doing a lot of busy work and not always, achieving the results that we want. So great things. Folks, thank you again for your time. Just a couple of quick things. We're always trying to improve everything that we do here at the TLE and bring more value to you. So if you wouldn't mind, we would greatly appreciate you taking a couple of minutes. We just posted a link, our survey link, into the chat here. You can see, just helps us kind of assess what we're doing, and always with the mindset of bringing more value to you of what and how we do. So would greatly appreciate it. If you guys could take a couple of minutes for that. And then also, as we mentioned before, we've had a lot of requests and interest around one-on-one coaching with Michael. And normally, packages start at $5,000, but for folks who join our, weekly coaching calls, and given everybody, given our understanding of, cash situations and all, we have a $1,500 package for everybody here for 5 hours of one-on-one time with Michael, and you can use that as you see fit, whether it's just a 5-hour block or once a week, right? But to kind of help you with the most pressing issues around your business. So we have a form that Jamara just posted in the chat as well. And if you want to fill that out, we'll come back to you and coordinate that. But again, just trying to help. And so $1,500 for 5 hours if you're interested. The link is right there.
Hey,
Maria, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
Oh, sure. Please go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know Michael was jumping back on. Sorry about that. Very quick question. And I apologize in advance. I think it's primarily my laziness at this moment that prompts me to ask the question rather than find it myself. In the library, are there any documents, for sort of self-study regarding a B2C company and how tactics that we can use to request from our clients 5-star Google reviews and things like that? I know that sounds very tactical, but I'm just curious, trying to add more tools into our toolbox. Are there any documents or anything of that nature in the resources?
There's not anything on that particular topic, I don't think, but let us track it down a little bit. I think that with respect to the kind of Google reviews and 5-star reviews, I think it comes down to, obviously, Chris, there's some just process around that. Just make sure you're implementing that across your channels, that you're asking. But also try to think about why they do it, right? Try to think about the way because everybody gets asked for them, right? Try to think about what type of, Chris, tell me a little bit more about your product or service.
Tutoring and test preparation.
Yeah. So the messaging around that is, don't you think there are other, parents out there that are really motivated to get their kids to get the experience? And if you've had a good experience with us, right, one of the ways we can get it in their hands. So parents must be thankful, right, when they find you and their kids have success, right? So it's not just asking for the review, because that's kind of like generic, right? We all get asked for reviews, but try to motivate them in a way to say, how did you feel before? And isn't it great now that you feel like you're really helping your child? And we'd like to share that with others. So if you agree with that, 5-star reviews will help.
So Michael, if I can interpret that in a sense, is that sort of like continuing the customer along their customer journey, or sort of emotion, bringing them to a little bit more emotional satisfaction conclusion?
Yeah, and I think that the last part you said, Chris, especially, is that when your relationships become less transactional and more visceral and emotional, then customers are ready, willing, and able to assist and help because they've had a good experience and it's meant something to them. We hope, for example, Chris, that people walk away from these sessions going, hey, I really have a place to go for answers. And if we called you up, Chris, and said, hey, Chris, we'd like some insight on some, things we could add to our library, we would hope that you would be willing to do it. But if I just call you up and say, hey, you showed up in a coaching session, can you provide me a 5-star review? It's just not as well received. So when they're more emotionally connected to you, which I'm sure they will be if their child did better, right? That becomes the basis of, hey, listen, we want to be able to help other people. And one of the ways we can do that is by spreading the word through 5-star reviews.
Yeah, Michael, I like what you proposed, because that's one of our missing ingredients, because like you said, everybody's busy. I get probably 3 to 5 review requests, a week, if not more. And sometimes we have to stop them in their tracks, right? Just to remind them, and it's working with their kids and stuff. And yeah, because I think when it comes down to that is something. It's better than, wow, this new ice cream shop or whatever, right? And when they think about the impact that has with their kids,
Yep.
yeah, no, that's great, Michael. We will definitely consider that and try to figure out how to implement it more. Yeah.
And remember what happens for every service that you interact with that asks you for a review where it's appropriate, right? Because you've bought enough stuff for them or interacted. There's a service that asks for your review when you've barely even touched them. Right? And it puts you off, right? And because it puts you off to all the requests for reviews, right? Because somebody who doesn't even know who you are, right? And the same thing happens on LinkedIn. People come to you and say, hey, I just want you to read this 7-page email on why you should call me back about why I should give you IT services, right? It turns you off to everything on LinkedIn because this is kind of not disingenuous, but just so Chris, when people get asked for reviews all the time from places that really it's not even appropriate to ask, then when you get asked by somebody legitimate, unless you created some real relationship with them or motivated them by what we're saying about an emotional connection to parents and stuff like that, it's very hard to cut through that stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because we always say education is a process, not an event. And for us, it can take several weeks to see a student's score improve or overcome some long-standing gaps that they have, rather than going to a restaurant, having a 2-hour dinner, and boom, the service is completed. So,
yeah.
So in our case, yeah, it's a little bit more different in that regard. No, everything you said is cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you can probably tell a lot of this positioning and emotional stuff is what cuts through. The other thing I wanted to just say before we parted is that if any of you are going out and hiring marketing firms, whether they be social media firms or PR firms or general marketing firms or digital firms, ask them, challenge them, ask them for, kind of a 1-pager on how would they position your company. Okay, because they will come to the table and say, we can do this and this and this and this, and we can do your website, we can do your email marketing, we can do your digital marketing. You're like, awesome. You can do the tactics that 1 million marketing firms can do. I want your insight. So I want you to write up 1 page, put on it whatever you want about how you would position us, right? And that will tell you a lot about the capabilities of those firms. Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
Thank you. And I know we're up on our hour, so everybody, thank you again for your time. Always happy to have you here, and looking forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.